The agency we work for is Wonderman Health, and we really sit at the intersection of what we would call data technology, science, and creativity. And we have clients that we work for that span big pharma, animal health, agriculture, but then also health plan, payer, all those kinds of things.
Yeah, so I'll add a bit of color around that, and what we do particularly for the consumer space. So we do a lot of work, research, primary research, as well as hold a large consumer database. So what my team does across the country and for our clients globally is we pull consumer insights from big data, small data, but really taking that and transforming that into consumer insights, which you're going to see a bit of that today.
Great. So our approach, there's the clicker, our approach for this was to understand the consumer of the future, 2030 and beyond. We first thought we should understand the systems and influences that really impact us as teens and into young adults. So we do believe yes, and there's prior evidence that tells us that who we are at that point in time is also who we are as we keep growing up. So the first one is on millennials. Millennials were raised in a child-focused world, so love yourself. And millennials are also the children of boomers. And they had many cultural influences that shaped them. So they didn't actually grow up from that young age in the digital age, but they quickly got into it. Economic expansion, it wasn't just country-centric or US-centric anymore. It was really a lot of global economic things happening. Busy kids, first generations with real schedules. So play dates into preschool, into very structured environments as they move through. They also had some pretty negative things that happened and impact them too. So school shootings, we remember Columbine as one. The whole AIDS epidemic, I think if you think of what was going on in potentially the music industry with someone like Freddie Mercury and Queen, but then also on the sports side with Magic Johnson and basketball. I mean, just very famous people who are contracting something like AIDS, and what is the impact of that? They were very sheltered. Their parents really wanted to protect them from the world. Actually, the first generation with more divorces than actually marriages that are staying together, and then a lot of merged families after that. I think we probably all heard, even if you were in 10th place, you still got a trophy, right? That was what was going on. I think for some of us in business right now and in managerial positions, there's a lot to be learned from this, and you see the impact of a lot of these things as you're dealing with millennial employees and just their mindsets and behaviors and attitudes towards these things. So they strive to be the generation that rids the world of all wrongs, right? And they believe they can do that.
What we wanted to do then is take kind of that global view and say, what is that impact on health and food? And so why is that important to you? So in general, if we look at, and I want to read this, I know you can't see this fine print, but I'll read that for you. But in general, if we look at a big picture, there's kind of three key themes that really stick out with the millennial generation. One is transparency. Truth, honesty, and transparency is something that they expect and strive for when they're dealing with brands they choose or companies they work with and for. Convenience, everything about convenience. It started with the millennial generation, and it will continue on through Gen Z, as you'll see. And then really, how does that impact food? How does that impact health? Really, with the millennial generation, health is very important. It's probably the most important when we look at rank across order of priority, and we've done some primary research with this generation to see what are some key drivers and motivators. Health is one of those key drivers and motivators. It might change over time, in which I'm looking at my health as more of as I'm younger, in my young 20s, I'm looking at health particularly for millennials, as more of a physical component. How do I look? How am I perceived by my peers? That's more, I'm healthy if I look good. As they became parents and now are in their 30s and approaching 40 even, you're at a point now where it becomes health much more important internally. So now not only is my physical appearance important, but it's also important for me to be healthy, to live a long life. So health is very important. Convenience plays a big part in the type of scenario that affects food. So convenience meaning healthy food in bite-sized pieces, healthy food on the go. This generation actually orders out. I think I have that there, the statistic for you. 81% actually eat out or order in. Grubhub, all of these companies are serving this population versus preparing meals at home. And then 56% likely to try ethnically diverse foods. So this starts the introduction to ethnic foods, global foods around the world. This generation kind of is embodied that. The next generation, Generation Z, it becomes just part of everyday life, right? So we're just seeing kind of some of these iterations happening as the next generations come in. And then really health, very different than what we'll see with boomers and even Gen X. 45% with primary care physicians. The majority of millennials will go to a retail site, things like CVS or Walgreens or Target, quick centers, urgent centers, versus have a primary care physician, because obviously they're not going to wait a week or two to see a doctor. So all of these kind of movements and changes are happening in the health space as well. I think we heard a lot about, I think that Governor Lee talked about earlier about, health insurance plans, embedding some incentives into the health insurance plans. We're seeing that pretty significantly across not only employer groups, but even in the individual market as well as in the Medicare market. We see, those types of what we call value-based programs being implemented. So health products are being designed that are value-based, that improve health outcomes as a center. So I'll just read this quickly. I know we only have a few minutes, so I can't spend as much time as I could. But we do have a consumer database, 260 million consumers in the United States that we have thousands of attributes on. And we have quite a bit of custom segmentation that we've done across this. We have one called Mindbase that I thought would be really relevant here, and that's because these are sentiments that apply really generationally. And so if I'm thinking about how a millennial might speak, it would sound something like this. I live with passion and stay connected to my values and community. Seeking balance allows me to stay grounded. And I try to find satisfaction and meaning in everything I do. I try to be as open-minded as possible, since there's always something new to discover. I take care of my health, try to stay financially responsible, try to live sustainably, and actively maintain my relationships with my friends and family. To me, maintaining a holistic balance is what keeps me happy and fulfilled. And that's 34% of millennials have that sentiment. So in whole, the perception is reality. For a millennial, perception is reality. So as long as they perceive something and they believe it is wrong, they will fight till the end to change it. And that's super important, and something we've seen probably across both health and food industry.
So now the big question is Gen Z, and what does Gen Z look like and how will they be different? I think one of the big differences right away is that they really are the first digital born native. So I know because I've got 3 of them, and they literally grew up at an early age with probably more iPads in their hands at that young age, but quickly as they get into 8, 9, 10, it moves to smartphone. And of course, with 3 of them myself now, the smartphone is the end all be all, and they actually, mine anyways, don't even use their iPads anymore. It's that smartphone is it for them, and they are absolutely connected to the hip on that. It's probably we talked about positive and negative incentives. It's probably the biggest negative incentive is there's risk of losing that phone if you don't get your homework done or if you don't do whatever. There's nothing to me yet that I've seen that's more motivating than that to this generation. A lot of cultural influences, again, that shaped them. The financial crisis of 2008, that's absolutely something that their whole family went through, and for those who did, it's definitely something that they're very aware of. Like millennials, they're really busy kids with schedules. Technology, I think, enables and helps them to do that. as I look at our kids especially, each one of them has a laptop that they come home from school with now, and it's assigned to them from the school. It's a MacBook Air, and they do everything. All the assignments are turned in, either uploading via email. Their connections to the teachers are that way too when they're not in class. As parents, you can go in and you can see every single assignment, what the grade was, what the status of it is. I mean, they are very, very busy, and I think technology allows that to have to enable that for them. The first generation not to have to been through a war. So Jen and I were talking about this last night. What are the implications of that? And just that kind of overall sentiment across the country at a time of war. What are the economic impacts? What are the specific impacts to the family? All those things. And they're really the first generation who has not had to live with that. Born from Gen X, so more practical, and you'll see that as we get into it more. So definitely more practical versus the altruistic. Realistic expectations around them. So no longer do you get a trophy for 10th place, right? That's for them. There's the reality that work and effort leads to good outcomes, and it's important. And a global mindset again too, understanding of just the globality of everything. We think of cultures and ethnic cultures and foods and everything else like that. I think they're very comfortable in that environment, and like socially, and just everything that comes along with it. So healthy living, financial, emotional, and physical health. So that's really what is important to them.
So this generation, interestingly enough, are creators, very creative. And not creative necessarily in the arts sense or music sense, but really creative all around. So they look for solutions. If the solution doesn't exist, they create it. And that is really who they are. And the reason they're that way is because they've been enabled since birth with tools allowing them to be that creative. So that's kind of a key element. And as Brian pointed out, they're practical. So a bit different than millennials in the sense that they're super practical. So we did a lot of work for Microsoft around both generations. And there are some key points that came out of that research and that study with Microsoft. Millennials, when we asked them about higher education, college, and I know Brian gave an example about, going to school for Gen Xers, that was not even an option. It was something you did. When it came to millennials, it was something they challenged, actually. And they basically said, higher education is expensive. It costs a lot of money, and I don't see the benefit coming out of that. Whereas if you now look at Gen Z, they say, higher education is important. I understand it costs a lot, but I'm going to prepare for that. And so what's interesting is when you look at and think about these kids actually almost as if they're born out of some influence from the Great Depression. These kids have money. They actually hide money throughout the house. They actually stock things in piggy banks. So they really were born in a scenario of save, spend. I'm going to spend this little amount, I'm going to save this, and I'm going to give. And they really have kind of that clear picture of save, give, and I'll spend this amount. So just a different perspective they come at it. Everything personal. Like I said, if it doesn't exist, if it's not what I particularly want, then I'll create it. And then obviously the convenience factor. So for them, on the food angle, whereas millennials were really more focused on food for health, it's really food for convenience. Now, think about this age group, right? They're 4 to about 18 right now. So convenience is really important. They're going to and from soccer games, at least my 12-year-old daughter is, eating oftentimes in the car. That being said, it's about, again, snack and bite-sized pieces that are healthy. So they don't go to, drive through at McDonald's necessarily, depending upon socioeconomic status. But what they do is they have bite-sized pieces. Cliff bars, all of that kind of packaged stuff is really what they're looking for. Food on the go is kind of a way of life. And they do eat snacked portions. What's interesting is in the schools, they have snack periods and food access for snacks. So there's kind of this snacking concept that I think we could explore much deeper with some research. And then obviously health is important, but this is about staying active. 75% are still reliant on parents for food decisions. So think about the age that they are. They're still kind of relying on their parents to kind of make those big decisions. Very ethnically diverse. So these kids know what a poke is. They know what sushi is. They know how to use chopstick. Like, it's just super ethnically diverse. They know, which Indian restaurant has the best food around them. So very, very expanded palette, if you will, for this generation. And accepting, very warm and accepting in general as a unit. So health, of course, they have primary care because they're still under their parents' health insurance plans. So that, we kind of think about that. Mom and dad are primarily making those decisions. 78% believe exercise and healthy eating is an essential daily routine. So what's interesting is it's not something that's important to live a healthy life. It's something that they do as a daily routine. So, exercise daily is something they kind of think about, and eating healthy daily is something they think about. Actually, this generation is the generation of treats. You get 1 treat or 2 treats a week, or whatever the family kind of has decided on. So they have that mentality of like things like that are treats. So I'll read again from the mind base for this generation to summarize kind of where their mindset is. I'm stylish, daring, and intense, and I make a point of living life to the fullest. My style comes across loud and clear. It's who I am, and I'm not afraid to express myself. I listen to my own instincts, and I have to live in the now attitude. With a practical twist, I enjoy finding hot styles in my pastime. So these kids YouTube more than you can even imagine. They watch people shop. They watch movie stars. They really YouTube quite a bit. In blogs, YouTube, online, in specialty stores. Whatever gives me the best chance of finding exactly what I want. And that is personal to me. Entertain me, offer me something I haven't seen before, and give me stuff that fits my personal style. Or just let me create it for myself. And so what does that mean when we think about who this is, the Gen Z? If it is personalized to me and it was convenient, then it must be good. So that is really how they're thinking. If I created it, it must be good. So I think we have to really think about that as we move into the next pieces of this program.
How do we validate this? And we wanted to use boomers as the example. So the boomers were born post-World War II, optimism and high. This was a lot of the stuff that they lived through, war, peace, and then the American dream. Some statistics there, which we can share after for everyone to have a look at. They're getting older and know it sometimes, but they really believe that they can tackle any challenge and they can get to a good outcome with that.
So the next generation is forcing new norms. So moving from boomers to millennials to Gen Z. Boomers are transaction-based, really think of mass solutions. So they think they can change norms by voting and moving big policy in place. Millennials, very different. They're purpose-based. And they think about collaboration, whereas should say Gen Z there, but Gen Z is really about personal, everything being personal and collective. So they kind of take a collective approach, not collaborative, collective. Get as many ideas on the table, and then they formulate how does that going to fit for me personally. Yep, so because who we are as a young adult is really who we stay, so our core beliefs remain with us as we age.
Gen Z has a historically high obesity rate. How does that square with their perception that they're eating healthy and exercising? Because those things don't seem to line up. Do you think that's a perception reality issue? Why do you see there's a difference between those things?
I do. I think it's perception reality, and we touched on it a little bit, but there's a huge social economic influence associated with that. And I think that's really important for us to understand. Healthy food, the accessibility of healthy food, accessibility of and the affordability of healthy food in lower income populations is just not there. And so that drives a lot of kind of the discrepancy there.
I found that you're the personalisation generation of the last one, where they take the collective and focuses on themselves. Yet, if you look at how we from the Western world have been incredibly philanthropic into developing and redeveloping other nations to bring them out of impoverishment. You know, we can look at post-Second World War development, the post-Japan redevelopment, South Korea in particular. Yet we look at the rest of the world at the moment. Where do you think this generation will fit with philanthropy on a global perspective?
So I'll try to answer a little bit, and then if you'll allow me to kind of go back and look at some things and formulate probably a more informed answer. But what I can answer is looking at the United States from a Gen Z perspective, and I kind of talked about it a little bit earlier. They've been brought up to have a giving mindset. And so you have this save, spend, and give as part of their kind of financial equation. Whereas I will say, you know, that's pretty significant. And so they're not at the point where they're giving time, they're giving other things, they're not necessarily giving dollars. But I'm not going to suggest that that's not going to manifest itself as they become earners in a bigger way, that doesn't manifest itself into more philanthropy in the United States. And then how that applies globally, I'd have to really look at some of the data to be able to connect those two things for you.
Your comments were incredibly enlightening for us. Question, how much does Generation Z care about farmers? And if they don't, shouldn't they? Especially because they're focused on collective problem solving, and that's kind of what farmers do, isn't it?
I'm just trying to think of any data that I might have seen, which I haven't, but then just from personal experiences, I really don't know they're at the point right now where they're that aware of just the food system, how the whole thing works, and who the key stakeholders are along that supply chain. I think there would be ways, kind of what Jen was talking about, where they could, from that desire from a personalization standpoint and the ability to figure that out, I think you could educate them on that. And I think that educational opportunity could help shape, you know, their view of that, you know, the entire food system and the supply chain and who those key players are along it. So I think that's an educational opportunity, probably more than something that exists today. But based on their persona and who they are, there's definitely an opportunity to engage them and to help them work into that and understand it much better.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think the point we really wanted to kind of drive home is just that, right? Our ability today to shape the conversation with Gen Z exists now. And when we do it now, it will stick with them through life, right? But we have the opportunity to kind of open their eyes to what it is we want them to see and then shape the conversation.
Okay.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you very much.